Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're just going to wait 1 minute or so for all the folks to enter the webinar. Thanks for being here. I see more and more people coming in. This is very exciting. We're just going to wait a minute or so for to give time for everyone to join. Thanks again for being here. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Kristen. I work in the Office of Admissions, and I'm really excited to be here today with you all. Before we begin the webinar, just a few items I'd like to go over. This session is being recorded, and you can also use the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen, to ask questions throughout the webinar today. So you can submit your questions anonymously. Please don't share any personal information, and we will address as many questions as we can. I'd now like to introduce Karina Vio, who's the Senior Officer of Parent and Family Programs and who's coordinated all of this. So Karina, take it away.
Thanks, Kristen. It's so great to be here. Yes, I'm Karina Vio. I'm the Senior Officer for the Office of Parent and Family Programs. So I don't know what's going on outside. Pardon if you were able to hear that. I'm delighted to be here to have a special webinar for families of senior students. So we will focus on families of senior students, but all families are welcome. And given our numbers, we actually have a split number, equal number between families of first-year students and families of senior students. Almost 150 of you have registered for this webinar. So welcome, everyone. We're excited to be here, and I'm excited to be here with a wonderful panel of folks. So let's get to know them. If we can go to the next slide. This webinar would not be possible without my friends and colleagues at UC San Diego, who will talk about how they support students, senior students, from their own respective areas. So I'm delighted to have them with us. I'm excited to hear what they have to share with you that you yourselves can use to support your students. So why don't we move over to our panel view, and we'll have each one of them introduce themselves. And I'll just call on you. And then if you could share your name, your area, your title at UC San Diego, and maybe how long you've been holding this position. So we'll start with Chris.
So good evening, and thank you everybody for joining us. We're excited, obviously, to have a good action-packed hour of conversation. So yes, I'm Chris Hergert. I'm the Executive Director for the Career Center. So I manage a team of about 25 associate directors and colleagues at the Career Center, and we obviously help about 40,000 undergraduates and graduates think about what's next professionally. Obviously, the seniors are very near and dear to my own interests because this is the end of a glorious road, and what a stunning year and kind of into 2021 it will be. And these type of events are super, super important as we think about supporting them and believing in them and the opportunities that will come their way, we know, as we all own this together. So I'm delighted to be here, Karina. Thanks for coordinating us.
Thanks,
and I've been at UC San Diego for 2.5 years.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Tyler, would you like to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Pengraft. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Engagement and Philanthropy in the Alumni Office. And I've been with the university on and off for the last 4 or 5 years or so. My role allows me to work with students, specifically seniors as well, in strategizing for fundraising, how they can help their fellow students, their peers, and how they can get engaged with the university in a real and hopefully transformative way.
And how long have you been in this position, Tyler?
Oh, sorry. I've been in this position for a year.
Awesome. All right. But a wealth of information. Let's go with James.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. My name is James Angler. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. I'm the Senior Academic Counselor and New Student Program Specialist, which is a nice long title to say I'm one of the academic advisors on campus. If you're not familiar, advising is very spread out around the campus. And so I'm actually one of the college advisors. So I work for Revelle College. And that's my senior academic counselor title. The new student program specialist title is I also do the orientation programs for Revelle College. And I'll be talking today just kind of from the advisor's point of view in general. Even though I'm in a specific college, I can kind of give insight to how each college is going to talk to seniors, and also draw a distinction of what other advisors on campus are going to be talking about. I've been in this position for 2 years now, although I've been on UC San Diego's campus for 5. And previously, I actually was with Parent and Family Programs working with Karina. So I'm glad to be back and talking with families again.
We're glad to have you back, James. Dan, can you introduce yourself, please?
Good evening, everyone. I am the other half of the professional staff in Parent and Family Programs. I am the program coordinator for the office, and I have been in this role for just about 2 years.
Awesome. So I'd like to take a moment and do a polling. Sometimes those who decide to attend the live webinar is a little different from those who registered for the webinar itself. By doing a polling and getting to know who's here with us tonight, we can probably tailor our messaging a little bit more in a targeted way, but also remembering that this webinar will be uploaded and will be for view later on. So we're keeping in mind those who are joining us tonight. We're also keeping in mind those who will be watching later on. So at the bottom of your screen, there's a hand feature. So if you can locate that, it's probably one of just a few features you have on your screen. I have a few questions. I'll ask you to push on that raise hand, and then to click back on it again just to lower it so we know, so we can get to pose the question, the next statement and the next question. Okay, so hopefully you've identified the hand raise. Here's the first statement. Raise your hand if you're a family to a senior student. Student in their last year at UC San Diego. So we have 112 people joining us, 44 raised their hand. Okay, great. Go ahead and lower your hand. Raise your hand if you're a family of a junior, third-year student. Awesome. About 14 or so. Okay, go ahead and lower your hand. Any families of sophomore students, second year at UC San Diego? Great, all right. Welcome. And then last but not least, families of first-year students. Go ahead and raise your hand. All right, about 17 out of 112. Awesome. Okay, any families representing transfer students? Families of transfer students. Great, about 15 out of 113. Great. Any families joining us from outside the United States, so families of international students? Raise your hand. All right. Thanks for joining us. About 10, 11 of you are here with us. Okay, 3 more statements. Raise your hand. So in the spirit of what we're talking about, right? What your student might know, might not know post-graduation. So in the spirit of that, raise your hand if you think that your student knows what they're doing post-graduation. They have a plan, they know what they're doing, and they're gonna go for that. Okay. About 18, 19 of you, well, a little bit more, 20-ish of you say that your student has a plan. They know what they're doing after graduation. All right, raise your hand if your student has some idea of what their plans might be post graduation. Some idea, so not completely sure, but have some idea. Okay, about 40 of you guys. And then the last statement is raise your hand if your student just doesn't know what they're gonna do post-graduation. They don't have a plan, they don't quite know, they're uncertain, they wanna explore some more. Okay, almost 40 of you are here. Okay, good diverse people here joining us. Thank you again for being here. Let's go ahead and get started with the rest of the agenda. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. Okay, again, so why are we here? Let me make my screen a little bit bigger. Awesome. Okay, so why are we here? So we want to address that post-graduation choices in the time, especially of pandemic. We are where we are, and a lot of things have shifted. And what your student may have thought about their post-graduation plans this time last year looks quite different for next year, or at the time that they will be graduating. And that the pandemic is forcing us to think about things in a totally different ways. And there might be some good lessons in doing things really differently, but also acknowledging that this is a difficult time and we might need some help on how to navigate this time. We're also here to talk about this because we hear from our students and from our families, and we'll talk about that, the famous question of what's next? What are you going to do after graduation? And with the holidays coming up in just 2 weeks, 3 weeks, students are going to be back home. It's going to be a topic of conversation at the dinner table, at breakfast, while going food shopping. And we just want to share some information with you on how you can engage in a conversation with your student about that very question with the holidays upcoming. So we hope that you'll be able to gain some information out of this webinar, and that it will set you up to have a conversation with them for the holidays or even after the holidays. All right, so how are we approaching this conversation? What should you expect from us? So if we can move to the next slide. So the way that we will be approaching that, we have a wonderful panel. And what's important is that we have to acknowledge that it is a time of uncertainty. It is a time of learning as well. And we also want to acknowledge that students may be coming from a very real place. And one of the things that we need to do is to acknowledge just that. What's also important is for us to normalize this time for your student. It's different, but we want to normalize that they and other students may not know what's next, or maybe they do know what's next, but they want to know how to navigate their plan post-graduation. We'll talk about some resources, how to promote their interests and promote their network. And then Dan, coming from Parent and Family Programs, will go over some guiding questions that you can have in your back pocket and have conversations with your student. And then our other panelists will talk about career services, how advisors can support your student, academic advising, opportunities, and how to maximize that relationship between the student and the academic advisor, and then some alumni to be events too that your student can look forward to. So this is how we're approaching the topic. Let's move away from the slides and let's get started with our first panelist, which is Tyler. So I'm going to call you to the stage. So Tyler, when we got together, we were talking about, this real place that students were coming from. So before we get into the networking and how to identify a mentor and things like that, what I'd love for you to talk about is, how students have expressed their feelings of uncertainty at some point during the UC San Diego experience, particularly their last year at the university. And then, that how you talk to students about this real place that they're coming from, while expressing their feelings of where they are in their educational journey.
Yeah, of course. So as I had mentioned before, my role in the alumni office is primarily to work with students, and I get to do that in a lot of different ways, but there are a lot of common conversations that I have with the students that I advise, that I mentor, that I speak to on a regular basis. And it kind of boils down to that uncertainty. They don't know what's coming next. They have a lot of thoughts about what could possibly happen, questions about whether or not they should be searching for jobs right now, or if they should consider grad school, or any other number of paths that they might take. And so it's always a personal conversation. Every student is different. But there's always that level of reassurance that you can offer that it's a time of uncertainty for everybody right now. And I think that as students, there's always been a kind of bubble of safety of being a student. You're in school, you're learning, you have a place. And suddenly our seniors are faced with this knowledge that this, you know, kind of like, it feels like a drop dead deadline where it's, you know, I don't have this place anymore that I have become accustomed to, this place of safety, this place of networking and community. And I have to figure out how to rebuild that in a new place on top of finding a job. And I know UC San Diego students, I used to be one. We're high achievers, you know, we put so much pressure on ourselves. And so I think the first place that I approach this conversation from is one of empathy, understanding, and also encouragement not to place so much pressure on yourself. This is a, you know, unprecedented global experience. And so it's important to acknowledge that first. And also that it's okay if you don't hit that home run right out the ballpark, right? That, you know, it might take time, and it's important to have that conversation with your students, because I think we've all been in situations where when the economy is good and when we're looking for jobs, it can take time. So it's important to remind them of that fact.
Yeah, you mentioned that you would address this through empathy and understanding and giving themselves some time. Related to that, is there anything else you would add, or if you could expand to how you would normalize the sense of feeling, maybe loss, maybe uncertainty that senior students may be experiencing, or even our junior students may be experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, it really, you can relate on a personal level. I think that at this point in our lives, we all can. One of the stories that I like to share with students is that I was a student during the '08 crash. And so, you know, the economy and the slow recovery of the economy after that was a very scary place to be in. And I remember, you know, that question that we posed at the beginning of this, that students get asked, what's next? I remember one of my partner's aunts asking me that question, and I had no answer for it. I had no idea what was coming next. And, you know, I want to share with you, because this might be something that we forget, but that can trigger a lot of shame for a student, is this idea of what's next. You know, especially during this time when you don't know, when you don't want to feel like a burden on your family if you can't find a job. That, you know, we've all been there. We all lived through the '08, you know, crash. We all remember what that felt like to some degree. And speaking from that experience as a student during that time, you know, it turns out okay. It feels terrible at the time, but it turns out okay. And that's what I like to remind them.
Yeah, I think it's important to be able to relate to the student, to the experience, and remind ourselves that we were there at some point, totally different situation, but that we were there at some point. We came out of it. There's light at the end of the tunnel. You mentioned job search. Can you talk about the difference between job searching 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago compared to job searching now, or most recently?
Yeah, so one of the things that is very obvious to me, especially too as I get older, and I still work with students, and I still work with you know, my fellow employees who might be a little bit older than me, some of my colleagues, and you know, my family members who might be hiring managers at companies, is that there is this understanding that students are not just students, but I'll say millennials and Gen Z generally are very different. They're a very different employee than employees of the past. And I chalk that up to cultural conversations about emotional intelligence, and the idea of, you know, relating to people and placing values above a job is something that is very different about students today who are going into the workforce. The other thing that's very different about, excuse me, about students who are graduating today, millennials and Gen Z, is that skill acquisition is very important. I apologize, I'm recovering from the flu. Skill acquisition is very important. Younger generations are not staying in jobs the way that they used to. They acquire skills and then they move on. And then I'm so sorry, excuse me.
Tyler, let me jump in here. I'll finish your
Sure.
sentence for you. Yeah, you bet. So a couple of things that I think she was exactly right on, that, we look at it from the Career Center from a very long-term lens. Our students who are graduating will have careers that are 15, 20, 30 years long. And it's important to think the first job doesn't decide a success or a failure in that, right? So be supportive of these are unprecedented times, and, a little bit of flexibility, because again, it's about translation of skills and experiences. And you can do that both today, you can do it in a year from now and in 10 years from now. The other piece I think is really important, and Tyler, I'll let you jump back in, is about finding mentors and coaches. We're all athletes in a way. This is a long-term marathon in our careers, and we're better when we have coaches and people to connect with. Everybody on the call has graduating from a university with 200,000 alumni. There's 200,000 people that have walked the same exact path that the students are walking now and have made choices along the way. We can learn from that. We can leverage that, and we can let our students kind of like decide for themselves which resonates, whether it's graduate school, whether it's full-time employment, whether it's a gap year, whether it's a service year, the military, starting a company. All of those options are definitely on the table. So Tyler, let me kick it back to you.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, and the last thing that I was going to mention that is very different today for people who are of younger generations is this idea of personal branding. I think we're all familiar with it, but students almost have a second nature when it comes to it now. It's like another language that they've learned, that they've grown up with. And so the idea of digital rather than face-to-face and interpersonal networking is very different than it was back in the day.
And social media definitely helps with that. LinkedIn, which I know Chris will talk about in a moment, helps to brand yourself for the interest in the job or whatever path that students are looking to do. If I may just grab your attention one more minute, Tyler, let's switch over to the resource slide that you can talk about for to our families on the call today. So talk us through these 3 points.
So we have a wide variety of programs available to seniors through the alumni office, and there are so many more beyond the alumni office. But the first program that we offer to our seniors who are graduating is our alumni orientation. We hold our alumni orientations typically in spring, but we're trying to expand that to have alumni orientation every single quarter as an acknowledgement that students aren't only graduating in spring quarter anymore, and these resources that they can benefit from are better when they're accessible. And so we're looking at expanding that to our winter quarter this year. Our Meet the Boss and Alumni 101 events are really amazing events in which you can hear from alumni with career expertise across colleges and academic divisions. We held a Meet the Boss last night, which was amazing, about STEM opportunities in San Diego. And our students really got a lot out of that event. And you get to hear from people who are hiring managers in their field about what they look for in younger generations and new employees. You get to hear about opportunities that you might not be necessarily aware of. And so I highly encourage you to, if you are kind of plugged into our university's network of resources, to look for those events and encourage your students to attend, because they will be able to get a lot out of those events. And a lot of really good advice. I got good advice, and I've been working professionally for 10 years now. And then lastly, our regional clubs. Wherever you are, we have alumni in your city. And these alumni who are part of these clubs and networks are so willing to donate their time, energy, and effort into making really amazing experiences in those cities, but also offering their advice and their mentorship for your students.
Thank you. I think the last point is really important. All the points are great. I think the last point is telling us too that with remote learning and students learning from home in different states and so on and so forth, that this particular point of regional clubs and learning who else is in your hometown who graduated from UC San Diego is a great opportunity to begin identifying your mentors for what you need them for your own professional and personal need. Thank you, Tyler. So we're going to shift over to Dan. Dan is the better half of Parent and Family Programs. Work would not be possible without him. He's just a wonderful person. Our office is right next to each other when we were on campus, and we just engaged in a lot of conversations about families who have questions and inquiries and just want to know, hey, this is what's going on with my student. How can you help me? And that's the essence of our work. And James knows that very well because he was the other half some time ago from the office. But Dan, let me pose you this question. So from your perspective of parent and family programs, can you share one example of a parent interactions you've had that support this very topic that we're talking about this tonight?
Yeah, of course. We do get many inquiries and phone calls or emails from parents about worrying and concern about what their students are planning to do post-graduation. Mainly, are they on track? Are they keeping up with their peers? Are they doing what they need to do so once their journey at UC San Diego is finished, they're on their next track already and they're set up to be successful? But there's one example that sticks with me is a phone call I received from a mother about a year and a half ago. It was early March, who was calling about graduation ceremonies. And we just got to talking, and she started sharing that her son had accepted a job offer already post-graduation, that it would be asking him to relocate to the Bay Area in California, that it was in the tech field, that he wasn't going to have a break, that he was going straight from graduation into the workforce. And she point blank just asked, is it okay if I tell him he doesn't have to rush into a job? She had concerns about maybe he was just taking the job because his friends were already being offered jobs as well. Is it okay if I ask him, are you jumping into this because this is what you want to do? Is this the right next step for you? Or do you feel like you have to keep up? Do you feel pressured to get a job right away after graduation? Is it okay if I have these conversations? Because she almost felt guilty because there's many parents who worry that their students won't be able to get a job after graduation, especially when we have job markets that may be like the one facing graduates this year or in the future. And so she wanted to ask, is it okay to have that conversation? And we talked through it and reassured her that being able to have that conversation with your student, ask questions about what they're planning for after graduation, but not just what's after graduation or what's in the future, is normal. And it's good. And it's good to understand what your student wants to do, what they've learned in their past 4 years, and how that's educating their next steps. That's a good conversation to have with your student, and not to be afraid to ask those questions, because it's coming from a place of concern, a place of you wanting your student to be happy and making sure that they are pursuing what they ultimately want to do and they don't feel pressured or rushed.
I mean, AKA also known as, being okay to just get to know where your student is at. And again, normalizing what they might be feeling and avoid any pressure they may be having outside of making that decision. With that, right, so I'd love to get into the guiding questions that you created for this, because I think you started talking about that in that very example. So let's move over to the PowerPoint slide. So Dan, if you can talk through these guiding questions that families can take with them if they were to encounter a conversation similar to that, or just want to know right now, hey, where are you at as a student with post-graduation ideas? So if we can move to the PowerPoint slide, and Dan will have us, we'll talk through these guiding questions.
Definitely. And these questions are developed not only with the situation I just mentioned in mind, but for any situation with family members discussing with their students and what their next plans may be. And we really want to start off with, you can ask your student, how are you maximizing your last year at UC San Diego? And what does that mean? Is it schoolwork? Is it looking for internships? Is it working for experience outside the classroom? Is it, what are you doing in the time that you have left to prepare yourself post-graduation? How will where you spend your time help you prepare for post-graduation? So what are you focusing on? For me, my senior year, a lot of the academics was kind of complete. So it was really more making myself and gaining those employable skills or applying for grad school. So depending on what your student's next step is, they may have to put efforts in different locations of their interests. So they really need to be mindful of what that's going to cost and what that time is going to pay off for. How can we support you in your senior year to help you reach your post-graduation plans? As a first-gen student, I will say my parents asking me, or when they were all for their support, even though they may not have been through the same process I went through, meant a lot. And it's nice to feel that your family is paying attention to what you're doing. It's not just about what you're doing in school, but it's about how you're going to use that degree afterwards. And simply, what do you see yourself doing after graduation? Sometimes it's good to ask students this because they may be in a rush. They may be feeling competitive with their peers. They may feel like they need to rush into something right after. So having them sit down and really think about where they see themselves, you can kind of work backwards and kind of develop a plan with them on what steps need to be taken so that they can accomplish and get to where they see themselves post-graduation.
Yeah, I think this is well said. I mean, you just said it yourself. These are good questions to help your student plan. So for those of you who raised your hand when you agree with your student might have some idea, but not completely, or your student doesn't have any idea, these are great guiding questions to have with your student to help them begin putting together a plan, or to just think about what they might be thinking about doing post-graduation. And really importantly, maximizing their time now at UC San Diego, remote or not remote, right? Whether living on campus and taking classes from their room, or they're at home with their apartment and they're taking classes from wherever they are. Resources still exist, and we're going to get to that very soon. All right, so we're going to, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
I just want to say these questions are also great if your student isn't even a senior. If they're looking for changing their major, if they're a second year student, if they're experiencing their first year and maybe the field of choice they went in to study isn't necessarily for them. Asking these questions about what these steps they're doing while at UC San Diego is important for them to really focus on what they're doing now to achieve their goals post-graduation.
Great point and great transition. So let's move away from the slide. We have James Engler, who will give us his perspective from the academic advising side. So why don't we start with this? What does an academic advisor do? How do you support students?
Definitely. Well, as I said in my introduction, there's a couple types of academic advisors here at UC San Diego. So I'm a college advisor. Every student at UC San Diego is in a college, and the college advisors oversee the general education requirements. So a lot of those classes that the first years are taking right now, or maybe some seniors have been holding off on, and the university requirements, which includes the steps you need to take to graduate. So the college advisor is the one that kind of does the final signature when graduation actually happens. Then there's the department advisors, and those are the advisors for the student's major. So whatever major they pick, they can go talk to their department about the specific classes or requirements that they need to take. And often we as the college advisors tend to be the first stop for students. They come, they talk to their college, they met me at orientation, right? And then we will have a conversation, say, okay, you also should probably talk to your major department to get perspectives on these things, because I don't like to speculate on things that I'm not the expert in. So the college advisor tends to be your generalist advisor. In Revell, we're called academic counselors, but it's the same concept, counselor advisor. And in the department, it's very specific to the major and to the field. And so that they're a good partner in having conversations about the field that the student's going into also. I would say that we spend a lot of time jumping into conversations about the nitty-gritty policies, right? How many units do I have to take? When do I have to take these classes? What are those requirements? It means we have a lot of conversations about exceptions to policies and appeals. And I think a lot of students might see us as the policy stop when I have a policy question, but the reason we call ourselves counselors is because we are very much a student focused, have a conversation about where you're going in your time here and beyond. So I see us as soundboarding folks. Come just talk through a question. Often a student will ask me a policy question like, what do I need to do to take a minor? Or what do I need to do to double major? And my first question is, well, why do you want to double major? Tell me about what you're thinking about. Where are you trying to go with this? And sometimes they couldn't get engineering, so they're trying to find other paths. And we just start having a conversation and we can meet out the real heart of the questions there. So that's really what a counselor does, is talks to you about all the rules and stuff that you need to follow up on, but having those troubleshooting conversations, having those big picture, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do it? Conversations, whether it's grad school, whether it's what class to take next quarter, we can have conversations about that.
So let's expand on that, James, because that gets to the next question. There's policies, there's units, there's a number of units that students do have to reach to graduate. Yes, absolutely. But let's talk about the heart of exploring a major, deciding a major, and how you support students explore those things in a relational way. Can you talk about that?
Definitely. One, I know we have a lot of non-seniors on here, but this applies to everybody, but especially to the first year, second years, third years. Ongoing counseling is best. You should check in with a counselor once a year, and even if you don't have any questions. Am I on track? Because what we'll do with a lot of folks is we'll do a graduation plan, and you can actually make an appointment, and you have plotted out your 4 years here, 3 years, 2 years, whatever you have left. And we can actually talk about, okay, which classes are you going to take? And we ask you to go talk to your department first. So then you've got an approval from them, and you can kind of get an okay from us to just map out what you want to do here. And then when the seniors come in, often they've either already developed these graduation plans or they did it on their own. All of our students are very capable of doing this without us. And then we'll have conversations about, okay, what are the last things you need to do to graduate? And what are you thinking about doing next? Because very often at that stage, my role is to make sure I'm passing these students to the other resources available to them on campus. I send a lot of students Chris's way. Maybe not Chris specifically, but to the Career Center, making sure that they're having those. Have you ever talked to the Career Center? Have you taken advantage? And a lot of times what students will say is, oh yeah, I went like one time my first year and then I haven't gone back there yet. And so then I'm like, oh, well, you should go back there because you can have conversations there too. And really trying to spur the student to put some thought on what their plan's gonna be next. Because I think when they're coming to us, they're like, oh, I have finals next week. I have this next week. I have that next week. I need help now for this thing. And we can help you with that and making sure that you're kind of doing a little bit more planning and preparation to look ahead.
So early planning is a good idea.
Early planning, and we can help you with the late planning too.
Exactly. And I mean, you can start early, right? A student can start early, first year, second year, go to the career services, for example, talk to a counselor, but then a year passes, a year and a half passes, your plans have shifted. So now your conversation with someone at career services shifts because your interest has shifted as well. So yes, it is a good idea to plan early establish your planning based on your interests, based on changes, because those conversations are fluid, they're not linear, and things come up. And this is what happens in college. You get new experiences that can just sort of promote just that.
And I would just add, like in the senior year at this time, often the plans are being wrapped up. Dan mentioned, like there weren't a lot of classes that he had left that he had to take. And so then we have conversations about, well, what do you want to take for fun? And for fun could be a number of different things, right? It could be, you have to wait till spring quarter to take that last class because that's when it's offered. And you're like, well, what else do I take? You can take classes that help expand your knowledge a little bit, go deeper into your field. You could take classes that boost your GPA because you want to apply for a competitive program. You can take classes that are just really that, for fun. You never took an arts class, you never took a hip hop class. Now is the time to take something like that too. And so we can have the conversations about that as well. And I would add, since even though I'm not a major advisor, this is a good time to go talk to your major advisor about the field that you're in. Build those connections with faculty, because often you're looking for faculty for letters of rec. And the major department can really help you navigate those faculty and navigate the work that you've learned, everything that you've learned about for the last 2 years that you've been here. So I just could put a plug to not only talking to your college advisor, but your major advisor.
So why don't we have you review some of the resources that you have created for us tonight. So Kristen, if you, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, and I could, as I read these kind of resources, I'd say the one last point that I'd make, kind of this last prompting question, Karina, that you asked me to think about. I see a lot of students get on this one-track mind that there's only one way to get to where they want to go. I've done all this time in this major, and so I have to go into this specific field. Or I know I'm going to medical school, and there's only one way into medical school. And I think that we have a lot of those open-ended conversations also of there's more than one way to get to where you want to go. That first job may not be the job that you think. I know Tyler mentioned that a little bit, but there's also other ways to get into the field that you want. Do you want to be a doctor, or do you want to help people in a nonprofit? And we have those kind of philosophical conversations of why medical school or why engineering, or I don't know what I'm doing with this major. I don't know where I'm going next, but I really like those GE classes I took way back when. Is there any way to make a connection there? And oftentimes we are starting those conversations and then sending students to where they can get more information. So just kind of talking about the tips in here, like I said, plan ahead. I wanted to make sure I did put some policy things that you as family members may not know about that hopefully our seniors know, but I know that you all as family members will support our students in remembering to follow these things. So seniors can file for their graduation. That's the degree and diploma application. That's officially saying, I'm finishing up, I'm leaving UC San Diego. That's the on paper record that they're graduating. They need to do that at least the quarter that they're graduating. They can do it even a quarter early. So if they're graduating in June, they can start doing this as early as January 4th and say, yep, I'm planning to graduate in June. It's kind of the last step, and it flags them for us that says, yeah, I'm actually leaving. And if they're not graduating until next fall, that happens a lot, and that's totally okay. Again, a lot of different ways to get to where you're going. They would just file it for fall, and they can start doing that over the summer. So, and I would draw a distinction between filing for graduation and the commencement ceremony that I think is a lot on your minds as family members, that celebration of what this student has accomplished. That's different for what the student needs to plan for. They need to file for graduation and they need to file for commencement separately, because they might really be finishing all of their classwork next fall, a year from now, but they still want to participate in commencement in June. And so they should sign up for commencement when you are all going to celebrate together, even if they have a lingering class or two. So that's a question that we get a lot from family members, because they're like, when are we going to celebrate? And from students of, I actually need to take this extra class because it just didn't line up right. And so those are the two distinctions that I want to make. There's a difference between filing for graduation and filing for commencement. Commencement's the party. Students can keep track of everything that they're doing. Whether you're a first year student or senior, I hope you're regularly checking your degree audit. That's a list of all the classes that you have to take. It even tells you what's missing and how many courses you have left. So every time I meet with a student, the first thing I do is I pull up their degree audit and we go over it together. And a lot of students haven't looked at it very often. And so like, oh, I still had that class left. So this is something that they should check to make sure that they're not missing a class, because if they haven't talked to an advisor yet, they may not know that there's a class that's missing. I put a link there. That's all the Triton Link tools. Again, a senior probably knows these by now, but as family members, you can see all the different things that the student can kind of look through on this web link alone. It's all the different tools that they can use to navigate the university. And then finally, I keep mentioning major advisors and college advisors. A lot of us are doing drop-in hours in person like this virtually. Or appointments over Zoom or Teams or another web resource. But all students can reach everybody through the VAC, and that's the Virtual Advising Center. They can send messages on there and counselors will respond. So if they have a quick question, you're talking to them at the dinner table, why don't you just message them right now and they'll get back to you. they can do that literally while you're talking with them about these questions, those prompting questions that Dan gave. They can turn right around and send us a message, and we can follow up with them the next day. So the VAC is just a really useful tool. So those are just some resources that I think you as families can point your students to or be aware of to help them out.
Thank you, James. All right, let's switch gears to career services with Chris here with us. So let's go back to the Brady Bunch panel view. Chris, thank you so much for being here, of course. Listen, career services is a central part of the UC San Diego experience. It's connected to academic goals, to personal goals that students can achieve together. Can you talk about one, maybe two ways career services advisors support all students, particularly senior students?
Sure. Yeah. So I also recommend this, that what I'm going to say, I think should be written down, and you should remind the students. So if you don't have something to write with, class is in session. So grab something or something to type on. So kind of a few things that we cover: the big five: resume, cover letter, your LinkedIn, your elevator pitch or your personal introduction when somebody asks you, who are you and what would you like to do, and your skills. So I'll mention them again: resume, cover letter, LinkedIn, your personal introduction, and your skills. So obviously you're coming from a really genuine place. You want to help your students. Ask them about one of those five things and ask them to kind of work on those things. That's where we can start that conversation. We certainly want to believe in them. We certainly want to be empathetic, but we also have to get things done. So that's kind of where I would begin. And that's a lot of what we do in the Career Center is we ask some, and I wouldn't call them tough love, but we ask some very candid questions about where they are in their search and where they want to go. Because life isn't fair, right? They could have, and I think one of my colleagues mentioned, there's one path forward. That's not true. There's lots of paths forward. There's graduate school, there's companies, there's gap years, there's starting a company. So we really want to think about optionality, right? Parallel paths, because you never want to say, I want to go work for a company that begins with the letter A, because a lot of people want to work for companies that begin with the letter A: Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, you get the idea. The other thing we really want to make sure of is we ask the students, let's talk about how you can kind of build experiences. Let's talk about you individually. So another thing I'd recommend is if you go to our website and you go to the bottom where it says about the Career Center, it says meet the team. I have associate directors on my team that help students with graduate school applications. We have ADs on my team that help them with engineering, if they're engineering majors, arts and humanities majors, health professions. So we specialize because we know it's nuanced, we know it's intriguing, and we also know that there's certain things that really resonate with populations. And so we specialize accordingly. We have an AD that covers international students. So what we have tried to do is think about who is walking on my campus, on our campus every day, and have an associate director that speaks exactly to that population, that major, that department, so that they can help and they can assist and they can add real value. The second thing I'd say is that the entire team works with graduate schools and works with employers. So we're hearing firsthand what companies are hiring for. I was just on a call with Bank of America at noon today. Bank of America is hiring. They are growing. There's a lot of industries that are moving forward. So sometimes don't just make some categorical assumptions. The world is kind of on pause. It's not. There's some areas that are, certainly, if you're trying to go into hospitality or the airline business, sure. But there's a lot of areas like technology and finance and marketing and ops and strategy that are still kind of moving forward, because we will recover from this and we will learn from it, and we need to grow forward. The last thing I'll say is that it's really important to think about what the students are doing. And it's less about maybe the perspective you had when you worked on your resume, which may have been a little while ago, but think about it from the perspective of, English majors are applying to medical school and biology majors are going to work at Amazon. It's not about the certain major that a company you'd think would want. They serve thousands of customers and people. They want a workforce that represents diversity, inclusion, and equity, and they hire for that. So think about what you can do and all the different kind of options you can support the students on. But we at the center can help the students because we have, like I said, specialists that can speak to kind of the nuances of the challenges associated with various paths forward.
I saw everyone's head shaking when you were talking about how you could be a major, but you can work somewhere else. And I think that's a really important point in this, especially with the operative words of varied post-graduation paths. So Chris, you shared great information. let me ask you, I mean, how do advisors work with a student who say, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to, I know I have choices. I just don't know what to do after graduation. How do you help a student kind of find their way through that very important question?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Great point. So number one, there's 12 competencies. So this is probably number 6 on my list of 5 that I mentioned. Number 6 is 12 competencies. Every student at UC San Diego through the curriculum learns 12 skills. These are skills that are baked into classes, into projects, into exams, etc. They have these skills. They now need to figure out how to translate these and more importantly, apply them to where they want to go. So again, a student's coming to us and saying, hey, I don't know what skills I have. You have 12 because you've literally walked on campus, and been here. I'll also say that because, and this is a great partnership we have with alumni, is that we have so many young alumni that are part of our Gold, which is, if you Google UC San Diego Alumni Gold, this is graduates of the last decade. And they are obviously a couple of years older. But the beauty of the model is they have walked and they have thought about these same exact questions that students are currently thinking about right now, and can offer perspective and partnership and kind of sharing of ideas. And they're only a couple of years or two older. And we have seen that having a couple of conversations with them is a life skill. This is something that you can do now. You can do it in 5 years. You can do it in 10 years. And the reality probably is the better and the sooner they practice this, the better off they will be kind of in a higher trajectory, like a lifelong career, lifelong alumni. Because, I think about it from my team, we certainly want the first success, the first win, right? Students graduating with something, but we really, really want the next and the next and the next, because that really speaks to engagement. It speaks to the value of their degree. It speaks to obviously them creating where the path that they feel they can have the most impact and legacy and things like that. The last thing I'll say is that it's really important to think about your career and the big 5 that I mentioned, the resume, the cover letter, LinkedIn, the elevator pitch, and the skills are always kind of a work in progress. They're never final, like an exam that you turn in. They're always a rough draft, right? And you're always in rough draft because you're learning something. So you can't kind of tell me, hey, Chris, I'm going to come in and talk to you in, kind of now, right before exams, and I'll see you in May. You're going to learn something between now and May. You should come back in frequently, especially true if you're a first year or second year. The world's competitive. We have a lot of students that intern, obviously in the pre-pandemic, and obviously have spent summers this past summer virtually in internships in their junior year going into their senior year. You have to start that process of where you want to be, potentially where you want to go early. So think about coming in, because again, the resume, recruiters, we hear this all the time. They look at it for 10 or 15 seconds, but I have students that will spend hours and hours and hours working on a resume that gets a little return on their time. Potentially a better area could be working on the other 4 things that I mentioned, in the beginning about the cover letter, their elevator pitch, their LinkedIn profile, things like that. So we really want to make sure they're spending a good time and return of that time thinking about where they want to go, and then they can deploy the assets accordingly to get there.
Awesome. So let's take if you could take maybe 1 minute to walk through the resources that you put together for us tonight. Kristen, if you can go to the PowerPoint. I also want to be mindful of time and be able to take 1 or 2 questions from our folks. So Chris, can you just take a minute to go through that?
I talk fast, so I'll take less. Handshake is the platform that basically every student and an alum can utilize. There's about 1,000 schools on this and about 250,000, maybe 300,000 employers. So needless to say, there's lots of resources here. Here's the link to it. There also, I just did a quick poll of how many jobs where recruiters have said, I'm open to hiring a kind of an alumni or a senior. There's your number. The Gold, I mentioned that previously, there's the link to it. Tritons Connect is an alumni platform specifically for UC San Diego alumni, unlike LinkedIn, which is the next link on the bottom, which is kind of everybody, but it has a school lens to it. Highly recommend you look at those 2 links because again, this is a chance to kind of learn that from people that have went before and kind of skills like that. Last thing, we do a program called Take a Triton to Work where we partner a student and an alum or a few students with an alum to kind of share firsthand experiences. We'll do this over spring break in 2021. So more information to come on that. But obviously there'll be mentionings and information from the Career Center. And then finally, this is about you. This is about a person. We don't boilerplate or we don't standardize things. You can set up an appointment with an AD to talk.
Thank you, Chris. All right, we have maybe time for 1 or 2 questions from our Q&A. And if we don't get to your questions, we'll put something together and email it to you. We have all your emails, and especially if you registered for tonight's program. So I have the first question, and this one is for Tyler. The question is, explain what is personal branding from an individual standpoint. For example, does it, oh, I just missed the, I think someone just moved it over too fast. Okay, here we go. Explain what is personal branding from an individual standpoint. For example, does it go beyond a person's individual subject area of interest or career objectives?
Yeah, so your personal branding basically refers to your online presence holistically, right? So we have LinkedIn, but we also have other social media platforms that employers do sometimes look at. So that includes Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Holistically, it's about how you represent you to the world. So that doesn't necessarily only have to look like a resume. You know, it can be, we like to say curated experiences in younger generations, but it's very curated, right? So it's the professional, personal, personability factor that you want to represent to the world. For everybody's information here, we do have our Triton LinkedIn group, which is a student-run group who does workshops for students on how to build their LinkedIn. So if your student needs help with that, I highly, highly encourage them to connect with that group first and foremost as the best way to start thinking about how to build that personal brand.
Thank you, Tyler. Chris, this is for you. On your slide, you have the abbreviation AD. Can you explain what that is, or what it stands for?
So AD is Associate Director. It's just obviously a title we have for the team, but again, it's back to the specialized. So we have an AD of international students, AD of engineering students. So that's pretty much it.
Awesome. James,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to pop in. And also too, you can schedule an appointment with a career advisor to go over your LinkedIn. I didn't want to say, don't do that. Sorry, Chris.
Thanks for the clarity. James, this is for you. In the spirit of being real and coming from a place of realness, here's a question. If a senior has a GPA lower than a 3.0 in bioengineering major, are they doomed?
I'm literally typing an answer to that right now. So you read my mind as usual, Karina.
As usual.
No. That's the short answer. The long answer is, it was kind of what I was talking about. There's a lot of different ways to get to where you're going. And I liked what Chris just said, because Chris is talking about all the different ways to talk about what you bring to the table, right? Your LinkedIn profile, your resume. GPA is just one piece of the story. And so the experiences that a student has had just being here at UC San Diego is a really strong university. There's a reputation that comes with that. All these alumni are out there proving that. And so there's a lot more to that than just the GPA. The classes they took, the professors they worked with, these professors are in the field. They're doing this stuff. So, I got an A in this class with this professor could actually be worth a lot more than I have a 2.9 GPA. So I would say, as the student is doing their career journey, as they're looking at graduate school, as they're looking at these different things, make sure that they talk about all aspects of what they're bringing to the table, the courses, the knowledge, the critical thinking that they have that they can offer to that job, that school. There's usually an opportunity to address any concerns on your application as well.
Let's do one last question. Chris, this is for you, as quick as you can. For graduating seniors without a job offer, what are your thoughts on applying for internship position?
So graduating senior, I have no problem. Again, experiences are bullet points on a resume. So whether they're a full-time job or an internship, they will build and they will lead to something in the future. So I'm on board 100% with that. I think, geography is a really big lens here, because we see students all the time that are specific about geography in this environment. They may need to expand that lens a little bit. And a point that James mentioned, the employer will Google the student. So social media, privacy settings, all of that needs to be kind of in a good order. Because again, it's a lot of times we're looking at students and hiring students based on multiple data points. The resume, the cover letter, the elevator pitch, a LinkedIn profile, a Facebook profile, if they can have that. Same thing for graduate school. It's like the statement of purpose, GPA, your graduate scores. It's multiple data points and making sure that you're working and thinking about all of them.
Awesome. All right, let's conclude our evening. If we can move to our last two slides, I just want to keep your attention for just 2 minutes. We are uploading all of our videos on our YouTube channel, and we will send you that link by tomorrow, and we will continue to advertise future Triton Family web series. But this is where you can find our upcoming videos, and then the arrow identifies how you can watch and listen to the video in your preferred language. Next slide. Our next Triton Family web series is next Thursday. This is a hot topic, managing loneliness and increasing social connection. We have Dr. O'Mara, who will join us, and our postdoctoral colleague, Carly Knopf, who will be navigating and facilitating the session. Winter quarter, we have a whole bunch of other topics that we want to share with you. So look forward to these in the upcoming month or two, so you can prepare for those. And last slide, as always, we thank you for being here. This is hosted by the Office of Parent and Family Programs in collaboration with many of our friends and colleagues on campus. And I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. I hope this information was great for you. We will see you next time. Enjoy your evening or morning.